So, sexual services for women are increasingly popular in Japan. I wanted to talk about this not just because it's an interesting topic, but it's also because I personally know women who buy sexual services and also men who offer them. Such services are called josei fuzoku in Japanese. Josei means women. Yo means for, as in for someone or for specific purposes, and fuzoku means sexual services. We also say jofu, which is an abbreviation of josei yo fuzoku. In general, it's men who offer such services, and they are called therapists. This is different from sexual services for men because I don't think they typically use the word therapist. Now, let me talk about how this works. The easiest way of using these services is just Googling them. Go to their website, check out what they offer and the prices, and pick a therapist. It typically costs about a couple of $100 per hour. Call the agency and book a therapist. On the day of the session, you can meet the therapist outside and go to a love hotel together, or they can come to your hotel or your place. But there's another common way of finding a therapist on social media. And you know what social media they use? They use Twitter. Therapists often have Twitter accounts to promote themselves, and women often have anonymous accounts to follow them and share their experiences. So there's kind of a Twitter ecosystem in this community. In fact, underground communities in Japan often use Twitter to interact with each other. So if you want to join some of those fun underground communities, I will teach you the kind of Japanese the real-life Japanese people today actually speak, because textbooks and apps don't really teach you how we actually speak Japanese. So click the link in the description and subscribe to my email group. So far, I just said sexual services, but what do they involve exactly? Well, typically, let's say you booked a session. When you arrive at the hotel room, they will ask you to take a bath. After that, they will massage you, and they will start touching you in a more sexual way. They might go down on you or finger you based on your preferences. Many of them also do things like hugging, kissing, or holding hands to give you a boyfriend experience. These things are pretty important. Now, did you notice I didn't say anything about penetration? It's because sexual services in Japan, it doesn't matter if it's for men or women, don't typically involve penetration, which is illegal. But as long as you don't penetrate, everything else is fine. So that's why. Agencies typically don't allow penetration, but I've heard both from men and women that it can happen. But it's not guaranteed. So what kinds of women use these services? Well, all kinds of women. You can't really say this is the type of women who use these services. But I think there are some common categories. The first category is young and curious. And these are the types of women I tend to know personally. They can be in their 20s or 30s, and they're really curious about sex and they want to explore. They tend to look for therapists that have special skills that average men don't have. For example, they can be experienced BDSM tops or they have extensive knowledge of orgasms. Average men don't really go far to learn sexual skills, so there's demand for professionals. But I have the impression that only a small percentage of women fit this category. My personal samples are biased because I'm a very sexually open-minded person, so I tend to know other very open-minded people. So I've read a couple of books about it and I found more common categories. The first one is old and virgin. There's a 35-year-old woman who is a virgin. She had been bullied as a kid and she had very low self-esteem, and she's not comfortable with her own body. Because of that, even though there were some guys she was interested in, she didn't think she deserved them. She was still a virgin and she was ashamed of it, so she wanted to lose her virginity in a safe way. Remember, she wasn't comfortable with interacting with men sexually, so she felt safer with professionals. She came across the idea of josei yo fuzoku on Twitter, and eventually she found her therapist. This story kind of has a happy ending because after having some sessions with professionals, she became more confident and she started hanging out with men. So that was good. Now the next common category is married and sexless. There's a 53-year-old woman who is married. Her son moved out recently and she has more time and wants to enjoy her life. However, Her husband doesn't want to have sex because he can't get it up and he's not interested in anymore. She has very high libido all of a sudden, so she googles about what to do with it. And eventually she comes across the idea of johu. She calls an agency and hires a therapist. Being in a sexless marriage or relationship seems to be a pretty common situation where they would use johu. In fact, I think this also applies to men. Now, you may be wondering, why wouldn't they have sex for free? Because it's easy for many women to find somebody who is willing to have sex with them. Well, there's a host of reasons. First of all, they have standards. They can't necessarily have the type of sex they have with the type of person they like. It's not easy to find somebody who has good skills and a mindset. You can try many people with very disappointing results. And sometimes you simply want to have sex with a really handsome guy, and you have access to them regardless of your age or your looks. So if you think about it, there's nothing strange about it. I also noticed some gender differences between sexual services for women and men. The obvious one is with sexual services with women, women are typically but not always bottoms and men are tops. With sexual services for men, men are typically but not always tops and women are bottoms. Women also tend to look for more boyfriend experiences rather than just sexual experiences. Some therapists have told me that some women want to text them every day, treating them like their boyfriends. That requires a lot of time, so therapists sometimes try to avoid these situations. But there are other therapists who actually exploit that kind of situation, so it really depends. There's also a lot of therapeutic elements in this. I know a few therapists who offer counseling as their main services, so they're like sexual counselors you can have sex with. But these things can also apply to men who use sexual services. And I want to acknowledge that there are also women who simply want to use therapists for sexual purposes. Now, there's no official data on how many women have used these services. Some people estimate about 20 to 100,000 women use these services every month. And the market size is about $400 million, which is about 1% of the market size of sexual services for men. But other people estimate that the market size is only about $40 million. So we don't really know because we don't know everything. We only know what we know. But what we do know is it's becoming more popular. You might want to say it's because of the lack of communication between Japanese people, especially with sexual matters, women start using these services. And that's certainly one way of looking at it. But I'd like to emphasize that a lot of it has to do with the fact that more women start embracing their sexual desires and the society is becoming less judgmental about them. If men can pay for sex, why can't women? Now, I know some of you guys are thinking, oh, maybe I can become a therapist. So I will tell you this. Most therapists don't have clients and they quit. And the popular ones were already very popular with women before becoming a therapist. So if you are so popular with women to the point where they would pay to hang out with you and have sex with you, maybe you can become a popular therapist. Otherwise, good luck. Or if you have good social media skills, you can become popular on Twitter, which will help you find clients. So if you want to be popular on Twitter in Japan, I will teach you the kind of Japanese the real-life Japanese people today actually speak because textbooks and apps are unnatural and outdated. So click the link and subscribe to my email group, Japanese with Yuta.